Is it ever a good idea to look for a boring job? If you ask recent college graduates what their dream job is, you'd hear things like neuroscientist, writer, pilot, game developer, not boring jobs like data entry, administration. So thinking back to when I just graduated from university, that's exactly what I thought. I wanted a job and a career that is exciting. And yes, guys, I had that exciting job and that exciting career. A long time ago, for about 5 years, I worked for this huge multinational bank, and I would rotate through different roles and departments, but at the core I was a project manager. And although many of you know that in the end I opted out of that corporate life, I must admit that there was a time where I kind of liked my job. I mean, in the beginning it was exciting. I got to put on fancy clothes, I was in charge of all these big and important projects, and I got to work with all these smart people, and every day I was learning something new about the banking and financial world. So I must say it never got boring. It was super exciting. But having that kind of super exciting and thrilling job also came at a cost. Even in my first year, I started working 50-hour weeks. I'd start my official workday at around 9 a.m., but I would need to depart from home at around 7:30 in order to get to work on time. And then I would end work at 7, 8, or sometimes even 9 p.m. and then would get home at 10 p.m. or sometimes even 11 p.m. Sometimes I worked on the weekends, so even though it was exciting, I must say that after a while, the exhaustion and burnout I felt from work overshadowed everything. But well, burnout is another whole big topic. I came to this huge realization, which is that exciting work does not equal fulfilling work. Because excitement is just this momentary kind of feeling where you feel elated, you feel thrilled, you feel alert, absorbing all the new things that are happening around you, similar to happiness being this more of a temporary and fleeting feeling. Whereas fulfillment is more of a deep felt kind of contentment, knowing that you are doing the type of work that you are meant to do, in which you're not only utilizing your talents, but you're also contributing to a purpose that is very important to you. So could we perhaps be all wrong about this, and exciting jobs are perhaps not really worth striving for, but what is the alternative? Should we be looking for boring jobs instead? Is there any benefit to having a boring job at all? So what is a boring job actually? Duh, it's one where you snooze off because it's just so mind-numbing. I would say that there are 4 components that could contribute towards what's called a boring job. The first one is that on a daily basis, you're working on repetitive and monotonous tasks. For example, when you're doing data entry, if every single day you're doing the exact same thing, so your boss hands you a stack of documents and all you need to do is just type everything into the computer, and you're working with the same kind of data every day, and you're performing the exact tasks every day, then that is the definition of a boring job. Your brain is doing the same kinds of operations every day. And also, there's just not so much changing at your workplace. Although I'd say that this factor here is rather subjective, but for some people, this would constitute a boring job. A job where your office remains the same all the time. There is practically no turnover. There is no change in the people you work with. Every day you're working with the same people. There are no new projects launched in your office, no new products being produced. There's no innovation, and it's just stale. It's just vanilla. The third thing that constitutes a boring job is that it's simply not challenging, which kind of puts your brain into a rusty state. You're just not growing, you're not learning new things. And after a while, your job even becomes so easy to you that you can work with your eyes closed and one hand behind your back. Is that a good thing? Maybe it makes some people feel good about themselves because things feel very easy and everything runs smoothly. But if you're someone who constantly wants to learn, you want to grow, you want to be able to do more and perform better, then that kind of job will simply leave you unchallenged. You will feel as though you're just wasting your time. And the fourth thing that constitutes a rather boring job is if you don't have long working hours. If, let's say, you can clock into work at 10 a.m. and even if you show up at 10:30 a.m., no one will say anything, and you can go home at 5 p.m. on the dot, and on some days even at 4:30 p.m. And also, this is a very, very telling sign. You have extremely long lunch hours. You can take the liberty to take a break for 2 hours without anyone saying anything and without you falling behind your tasks. But what's wrong about it? I mean, for many people, people, this would be a dream scenario, right? We'll get to that in a bit. No, there's no dichotomy between boring job and exciting job, because boredom or boringness, yes, I looked it up, boringness is actually a word, comes on a scale. So if you think about your current job, you can think about it on a boringness level from 0 to 10. Tell me in the comments below, what would your job score? From 0 being the least boring to 10 being the most boring. I had every job on the scale from 0 to 10. When I got my first job as a project manager in banking, I would say my job was at a boredom or boringness level of close to 1 or 0. There was no time for boredom, not the least because I made so many friends and new colleagues in my first year. But during my uni time, when I just did any kind of job I could get my hands on just to make enough money to survive, I had jobs that were pretty boring. I had a job where I was working at a photo development factory. Sorry, I don't know what it's called exactly, but at that time, smartphones weren't a thing yet. Yes, people actually had cameras, sometimes really cheap plastic cameras that they used to take pictures, and then they had to take the roll, the negative roll, and then submit it to a company for it to be developed and then pick up the pictures. I know, guys, the way I describe it sounds so ridiculous because I'm just simply not used to that whole process anymore. I can't even describe it. Well, when I was working in that photo factory, let's say, I had to put this paper pockets which had the negatives inside them on an assembly line, and I had to do that for hours on end. And that was just super boring. But I just did it for money, and it was my first year in university. I was stupid. It didn't occur to me that I could be looking for other kinds of jobs. But anyways, I only did that assembly line job during 2 weeks during a semester break. And I earned a lot of money from overtime. But at least you know that I'm not talking bullshit, and I do know what a boring job is like. So now let's get back to the question. So is it always the best idea to look for an exciting job? Is that always what you should be aiming toward? Or could there ever be a time in your life when looking for a more boring job can make sense? And I would say the answer is yes. If you're like me and you've been working for well more than a decade, then you can perhaps understand why I'd say that yes, boring jobs can have a place in your career. A limited place though. 5 years ago, I just arrived in Canada. At first, I wanted to look for an exciting job, and it even crossed my mind that I wanted to go back into banking. But things just didn't work out as I expected. With no connections here, being a newcomer to Canada, having no what's called local Canadian experience, I just couldn't get into the job market, at least not where I wanted to get into. Another possibility could also be that deep down inside, I just never really wanted it. And that is why I didn't put in as much effort as I could have. So long story short, I went through a very difficult time and I almost hit rock bottom because I didn't know what I wanted to do until I finally made my first few videos on YouTube, and I realized that yes, I want to be a content creator. As you can imagine, it is not easy being a content creator. It took so long until I started making money off of my YouTube channel. So I have this one channel, Multiple Careers, but I have another larger channel which is named Living in Canada. But there was a time in the very beginning of my content creation career where I got really frustrated because I wasn't seeing any money. I had to find another job. I had to find a part-time job. At that time, my husband was transitioning from being a full-time student to doing his internship and trying to get his first full-time job. And we were really eating into our savings that we brought here to Canada. So I definitely needed to be contributing financially to this household soon, fast, as soon as possible. And that is why I decided to just get a random job, and it can't get more random than being a barista at Starbucks, right? So that job is what I would call a boring job. So for less than a year, I worked as a barista for about 20 hours per week. And the great thing about that was because the hours were so flexible and it didn't require much brain power to work there, although it was super exhausting and very challenging, I still had the time to do my content creation and to develop my 2 channels. At that time, that boring barista Starbucks job was the perfect job for me. So what I'm saying is that sometimes the most boring job can be the perfect job, the perfect perfect contributor to your career if you're doing it at a strategically right time in your career. So what are the kind of situations when you might want to get a boring job? So here are 3 different scenarios that I can think of. The first one is if you're planning to start a business or you're developing your own product. And of course, some people can't really do it on the side, so they still have their full-time job, and then on the side they launch their business in the evenings and on the weekends. But if you have a really high profile and demanding, challenging job where you work 50, 60-hour weeks, then oftentimes that's not possible. So if you're serious about wanting to start a business, but you're also financially reliant on an income, that would be a great time to consider whether or not to switch to a less challenging, more boring job. The second scenario where you may benefit from getting a boring job is when you want to change careers. You may know what you want to do, but you know that that thing you need to do will take you time. For example, take a course, go for classes, or go back to school for a while, or get a particular type of training and so on. And perhaps you're thinking that this whole career change thing is almost impossible because I'm so occupied with work. My work is sapping so much of my energy. I just don't have any energy left to change careers. So I'm kind of stuck, right? So that's also a perfect situation in which you might want to consider changing from a more demanding job to a less demanding, less challenging, boring job. There's also a third scenario, and that is when there's a time in your life when you want to spend more time with your family. Or let's say you have a newborn or a little child and want to take more time to take care of them. Well, you cannot give 100% to everything, so something's got to give. So in that kind of scenario, it makes sense that for a while you downgrade to a more boring job, a less demanding job, so that you have more time for your family, at least temporarily. I need to stress this one thing. If you go for a boring job, have it for a limited, defined time and with a specific intent. Like I said earlier, for example, to build a business, to change careers, or to spend more time with family. But why not just have a boring job forever if that's what I want? Of course, there are always people who are fine with having a boring job for their entire life. That's just how they tick. For them, having an exciting, fulfilling job is not at the top of their list. But I don't know about you guys, but for me, work has to have a purpose, work has to be fulfilling, and it has to be fun. Not at all times, of course. There are always difficult times, no matter what job you have, but overall, work has to be meaningful. The reason that I would never do boring work by choice for an extended amount of time is because it would just sap my joy for life. I would feel unchallenged, bored. I would feel that I'd be wasting my time because I'm not growing and I'm not learning anything and I'm not becoming a better person in any way. I'm just doing the same things on repeat day in and day out. So if you're also someone who wants to grow, who always wants to learn something new, then I'd say never settle for a boring job unless you have a good reason to do so. But for the long term, what's got to guide you is fulfillment and purpose. And if you want to find out more about how you can find and pursue fulfilling work, then you might want to pick up my ebook, Multiple Careers, Quit the Rat Race, Pursue Fulfilling Work, which you can get on Amazon. In that book, I will show you how you can build a career that is purposeful, meaning that you know exactly why you're doing what you're doing, and also fulfilling, which means that you'll experience a deep sense of contentment. And also good news, guys, the paper version will be coming out pretty soon. So if you want to stay updated on that, then you can subscribe to my mailing list over here. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye!